start a list of the best RPG characters of all time is obviously a really tall order, but I've independently decided I'm up for the job. Of course, my list isn't going to be the same as your list, so you'd better head down to that comment section when I inevitably don't pick your favorites, but here are some truly excellent ones. We've included protagonists, party members, and companions who snagged our hearts and charmed us through their complexity, character progression, and general badassery. Whether human, vampire, alien, immortal, or engram, these characters dazzled us enough to make the list. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 best RPG characters of all time. Number 10, Garrus Vakarian, Mass Effect. We're starting with a relatively innocuous crowd favorite, as I'd imagine there weren't too many people who played Mass Effect and came away from it without Garrus being your love interest or best bro. While I'd plant myself in the latter camp there, as Garrus and I were just really good friends, Garrus Vakarian is the Turian sniper previously of the Citadel Cops, who endears himself to you by doing one very simple thing. Just being an all-round chill dude you actually want to keep talking to and hear what he has to say about your missions. BioWare does something with Garrus very few developers are keen to do with their suite of companions, and that is create an actually relatable character who doesn't need to lean back on a stereotype, a larger-than-life persona, or that typical Nathan Drake mischievous charming rogue shtick. Instead, Garrus is delightfully understated. In a ship wall-to-wall with giant personalities, and without discounting his introduction in Mass Effect 2 as the deeply cool infiltrator operating under the name Archangel, Garrus is just an all-out chill dude. He's exceptional in a fight, he has his own strong moral footing and deep loyalties, and he bloody loves Shepard. Games give us plenty of divisive companions and heroes with grand callings. Sometimes it's refreshing to team up with a good dude wrapped up in wild events that force him to second-guess his binary view of justice. Also, the Mass Effect 3 scene at the very end where you can shoot cans with him all the way up at the top of the Presidium, and if you decide to let him win, he says, "I'm Garrus Vakarian, and this is now my favorite spot on the Citadel," is just gold. Number 9, Ichiban Kasuga, Yakuza Like a Dragon. Having stepped back into the spotlight with the launch of Yakuza Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Ichiban Kasuga was introduced to the series in Yakuza Like a Dragon. For those who aren't versed in the history of the franchise, there's only one big thing you need to know narrative-wise, and that's the fact that Kasuga had some unbelievably big Kiryu-sized shoes to fill. Series protagonist Kazuma Kiryu died at the end of Yakuza 6 after starring in no less than 12 main series games before Kasuga rocked up. Spoiler, but not really a spoiler if you've seen the new Like a Dragon game, but it turns out Kiryu didn't actually die. But when we played Like a Dragon, there was no reason to expect that we hadn't had a complete replacement of our beloved protagonist with a new one we knew nothing about. So who could step into the shoes of our stoic yet kind, unbelievably tough and stylish Yakuza with a troubled and heart-wrenching backstory who just oozes cool wherever he goes and whatever he does? A goofball, a totally lovable, self-declaring hero who, despite falling afoul of some nasty adversaries that land him in prison and hot water more than once, never lets himself stay knocked down. Ichiban Kasuga, in many ways, is the only protagonist who could have followed Kiryu, because apart from their combat prowess and willingness to help the little guy, the two share very little in common. Kasuga is emotional, vulnerable, impulsive, and outlandish. He's childish in an endearing way and imagines himself as the hero he wants to be. He's just a guy with big dreams who's happy to be there and do what he can even when he can't work out how just yet. Also, he really pulls off that red suit. Besting the impossible task of following a character so beloved and impressive, he easily could be on this list as well, except that I'm trying not to double up on franchises. Kasuga's popularity just can't be denied. Number 8, Geralt The Witcher. From two guys who, despite finding themselves in massively high-stakes conflicts, are pretty regular dudes for the most part, we now have a guy who is anything but regular. Geralt is a super powerful witcher capable of taking down terrifying beasties, a Casanova who looks great in a bath, a stoic with a massive kind streak, and a man with what is probably gaming's weakest ankles. Despite dying instantly to a 6-foot drop, Geralt is the kind of hero who doesn't need a suite of companions or a sidekick. No matter what manner of monster you find yourself up against, Geralt, with his dual swords, powerful magic, and tough attitude, makes every battle feel surmountable. And that's a big call in the continent, riddled with some of the most fearsome enemies your mind can conjure up, and then some. If you looked up badass in the dictionary, you'd probably see this white-haired, cat-eyed boss. He also gets plenty of opportunities to flex his extraordinary depth, his deadpan humor, and his charisma, which always hit the mark. Couple that with the perfect voice and delivery, his wit, and his natural-born talent for attracting the hottest women on the planet, and Geralt is so easy to love embodying. Number 7. Kim Kitsuragi, Disco Elysium. Sometimes you can't help but love the bizarro hero bumbling through side quests, conversations, and conflicts to the best of their ability. But when said hero is as unwieldy and unpredictable as alcoholic amnesiac hot mess Harriet Dubois, you have to feel sorry for his sidekick Kim Kitsuragi, who, let's be clear, did not team up with Harry of his own volition. Kim is a thorough and polite investigator, and Harry is your protagonist, a blank slate who will be whatever you decide he'll be. Almost always, this is a complete idiot who throws himself completely into ideologies he doesn't understand. This extends to going down to the docks, seeing a really loaded-looking lady and saying, "You look rich, can I have some money?" While that's hilarious, the way Kim deals with Harry is somehow even more so. He spends most of his time silently judging you and trying to deal with your wild notions, politely prodding you towards the objectives at hand. Harry begins to get his shit together thanks to Kim's influence, but Harry also breaks down Kim's impulse to stay straight-laced. There are a couple of delightful scenes where the two even out and meet on the same level, and it's here they both learn how the other ticks and what past traumas and current difficulties have shaped who they are. The game is designed with near constant dialogue and narration, so you get more insight into its characters than most RPGs offer. There really aren't that many characters like Kim in video games. He's written in this delicate and understated way that keeps him in the role of sidekick, but without sacrificing any of his well-rounded complexity. Also, if you can pass a few super tricky dice rolls, you'll get to see him get his groove on in a makeshift rave. And, to my mind, it's the best scene in the game. Hardcore. Number 6. Morrigan, Dragon Age. Morrigan is a curious character in that she's tricky to call likable. There's so many things about her that are inarguably fascinating, complex, and deeply cool, especially when she's in a fight. But it's rare to see a character who is, how do I put this, kind of a bitch. To be fair though, she's a bad bitch. Morrigan is in it for herself, and that's a pretty unique thing to find in an RPG companion. Generally, when you get the opportunity to influence and talk to your companions, you'll bring them around to your point of view. Morrigan does something fascinating where she actually tries very hard and has a lot of good points to bring you around to her point of view, and you actually find yourself thinking her way and eventually doing things her way, as can be really evidenced at the very end of Origins. She's a delight to get to know and understand even when she's bugging you, and with a brutally realist grey moral standpoint, she's one of the more pleasingly complicated video game characters. BioWare is also clever about injecting a lot of crosstalk between your companions as you journey around Thedas, so you get a further insight into her personality by listening to the way she communicates with your other buds. She also has a really interesting progression arc between her appearances in Origins and Inquisition. While Dorian and Leliana, as well as a whole bunch of other Dragon Age characters, could easily snag this spot, Morrigan is just iconic. And with her being voiced by Claudia Black, it's all just so perfect, she's got the entry. Number 5. Cloud, Final Fantasy VII. This entry makes me wish this list was just Final Fantasy characters, because settling on just one was a nightmare. There are the delightfully goofy characters, those that subvert your expectations and charm you in ways you didn't expect, and characters just brimming with that earnest goodness that only JRPGs have truly nailed. While Yuna and Vivi, alongside like 25 other options, honestly I could barely think of 2 to put at the start there because there are so many alternatives, I couldn't help but land on the obvious choice, which is Cloud. Cloud may not be as expressive as some of the other Final Fantasy leads, but his progression arc and character development is almost without equal. Even his hair and sword have become iconic. His hero's journey not only makes his personal progression and inner turmoil intriguing, but it's strong enough to carry the entire narrative and everyone connected to it. The fact that Cloud doesn't know any more about his past than you do means you're tied together in every new revelation, not to mention every new friendship built and every hurdle overcome. His compelling struggle with Sephiroth, one of the more interesting villains ever created in his own right, alongside his vulnerability that comes out when he's faced with painful realities, make him all the more complex. Cloud is one of the ultimate video game heroes ever written, and the recent remake is only serving to cement just how brilliant he is. Number 4, Cassandra, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Cassandra might not be your favorite Assassin's Creed protagonist, but she is mine, which is a big statement because AC games are stacked with deeply likable protagonists. Luckily for me, we're only focusing on RPG protagonists here, and since Cassandra rocked up when Assassin's Creed decided to go the way of RPGs, I get to include her on this list. Where Cloud has a long journey of figuring out who he is while largely being the strong silent type, Cass has a long journey of figuring out who she is while bemoaning and sassing the parade of weirdos populating ancient Greece. Sure, she sets off to eliminate an evil cult, fight in a civil war, take on every Joe Blow's busywork, and a slew of towering mythological beasts, but she does it all with a delightfully fed-up attitude that the Grecian bozos she spends most of her time helping more than deserve. In case you haven't personally had the pleasure, I can basically explain it in a sentence. In short, she is the personification of that GTA meme, here we go again. She's also tough as nails, so you get to be an unstoppable powerhouse on top of it all. AC Odyssey teeters so successfully between serious, impactful moments and silly ones, and Cassandra mirrors that balance perfectly to make Odyssey one of the more entertaining and lighthearted entries in the franchise. Number 3, Aarian, Baldur's Gate 3. Almost every character on this list is from a game or series that's so well written, selecting one character from even that limited of a field is a nightmare. Baldur's Gate 3 made this pretty much impossible with, let's face it, almost every companion being like a 12 out of 10. I have though decided to go with Aarian because even though all of the backstories and growth of the characters are amazing, his comes out in a slightly different way that I really enjoyed. Personally, that's the reason. It's not because I personally romanced him. I also romanced the next character on this list. So the bias is biasing, but anyway, let's go ahead. The Tortured Vampire is supported by Larian's incredible writing, the nuance of his characterization, his pitch-perfect animation, and Neil Newborn's award-winning delivery. It would be so easy for Aarian to have been your classic bad boy hottie, but he's far more complicated than that. Due to a twisted relationship with his abusive sire, who made Aarian use his looks and charm to lure in victims, Aarian isn't used to any form of freedom. Though he seems forward in your connection early on, it's revealed that this is largely because it's the way he's been taught to ingratiate himself to people. Though it's interesting, the game doesn't actually explicitly tell you this, you just notice little things. I decided to reload from a save that was about 50 hours before when I was getting towards the end game, and you notice in the early intimate moments when he's asking you, oh, you want to get with me, right? You must be interested in me physically. He's actually got a really sad expression on his face, and it's very clear that he's hoping that you'll want more from him than just that. While initially coming off as sexual and egotistical, your connection with him actually only develops by asking him what he wants, and if you're romancing him, backing off and reassuring him you actually like him as a person. Strangely, it's one of the least physical of any of the game's romances. It's more than a little heartbreaking once you see how warped his self-image is, and it's a treat to watch him claw his way back to a place approaching peace if that's the way you decide to go with your storyline. Number 2, Makoto Nijima, Persona 5. From best boy to best girl, Makoto Nijima tops out the best of companions in a game that's absolutely stacked with incredible confidence. As is the case with Baldur's Gate 3, Persona 5 is a mighty long game, so you get to spend a really long time getting to know its characters. Makoto first enters your protagonist's orbit as the put-together straight-A student, killing it at life and academia, and putting up with no less than her best. Get to know her more though, and you learn she's really pushing herself to breaking point, having taken on far more than she should have had to, grappling with a broken family, and quietly desperate to step outside of her claustrophobic straight-edge life. It makes sense then that when she does eventually unleash her persona, she becomes this motorbike-riding, leather-donned powerhouse codenamed Queen. And a queen she is. As you get to know her, she lets her guard down and her vulnerable side shows. She begins to form close connections with you and your team and showcases the full gamut of her beautifully complex personality. She also has dialogue in the game professing her love for Yakuza Like a Dragon, so it's nice we've come full circle on that one. Number 1, Johnny Silverhand, Cyberpunk 2077. Okay, I know this is a really controversial one I've got at the end here, but bear with me, trust the process, I do have reasoning, and also, I suspect if you've hit the end of Cyberpunk 2077 yourself, especially if you did the Phantom Liberty endgame options, I reckon you're gonna agree with me. A unique thing that links Makoto and Johnny Silverhand is they both start off super unlikable. Both make an awful first impression, coming off as rude and standoffish and making no secret of the fact that they think your protagonist is an inconvenience and a dummy that they'd rather not have their ride hitched to, and you'll probably feel the same about them. They also both take tens of hours to actually like. But oh boy, when you do like them, you'll absolutely fall in love with them. It takes a really long time for them to soften up and for you to grow that relationship, but there's something special in a game this long, and only a game this long would allow it, in having to actually earn that relationship. Johnny Silverhand is a rock star and a larger-than-life personality, riddled with contradictions and willing to throw his weight behind all sorts of big ideas and hot takes on every conflict, corporation, and character in Night City. Yet the more you get to know the Keanu Reeves-voiced anti-hero, the more he's willing to admit to his flaws and unrealistic idealism. He's fueled by the spirit of rebellion and vengeance, but through his gradually burgeoning relationship with V, who's also a fantastic well-written character, he manages to posthumously see himself and his actions in a different light. Not to mention the beautiful endgame interactions you get with him if you've gone to the effort of investing in your friendship. Going from finding the guy so grating you actually want to kill him to towards the endgame where you've developed your relationship so much that a lot of people, including me, felt like they were willing to die for him is a reflection of how good the writing is and how great this character's 180 and progression is.